Hi, and thank you for joining today's presentation on the City of Chula Vista's Building Energy Saving Ordinance. My name is Rebecca Baptiste, and I'm a manager at the Center for Sustainable Energy. Before we get started today, we just wanted to make a couple notes on logistics. As all of you may be very well aware, due to COVID, there is higher than normal usage on GoToWebinar. So if you should encounter any audio issues, we've listed the dial number and access code so you can call in via your phone. So if you want to take a minute to jot that down real quick. And then if you do have any questions, we will have periods throughout the webinar where we'll take a break and answer questions that come in. There is a chat feature where you can choose to send a question to myself and the other panelists. So please be sure to use that feature so we have the questions submitted, and when we get to our Q&A sections, we'll cover those. And then if you do get disconnected or have any other issues, you can reach out to Colleen at the email address below, and she'll be happy to help you. And then finally, if you would like to learn more about the ordinance and sign up for notifications and access resources, we've listed the City of Chula Vista's website below for the Building Energy Savings Ordinance. So be sure to bookmark that as well, because that will be a great resource for you going forward. So our first poll question today is, how did you hear about this webinar? So in a couple minutes, my colleague Sophie will be enabling the polling. So you'll see a pop-up come up and you're able to select an answer. And we'll give everyone a couple minutes to review and submit, and then we'll continue on with the presentation. Thanks all for responding to the poll. It looks like most of you heard about the webinar from a Chula Vista email or a newsletter. So thanks for joining today. And we'll have a few more polls sprinkled throughout today's webinar. So for today, we're going to kick us off with a benchmarking overview, and then we will dive into the City of Chula Vista's proposed ordinance. And then finally, we'll wrap up the bulk of today's presentation going over Portfolio Manager, which is the tool used for benchmarking, and we'll do a live demo. And with me today, again, my name is Rebecca Baptiste. I'm a manager at the Center for Sustainable Energy. We also have Barbara Lochi from the City of Chula Vista and Colleen Wisniewski, also with the City of Chula Vista. And then if you haven't heard of the Center for Sustainable Energy before, we're a big nonprofit headquartered here in San Diego. We have about 250 employees, and our mission is simply to decarbonize. As I mentioned, headquartered in San Diego, but we have employees across the nation, and we do a variety of projects and programs, from national programs, statewide incentive programs like the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project, and region-specific solutions as well. Our areas of expertise are clean transportation, the built environment, and technology convergence and demonstrations. So our next poll, we want to learn a little bit more about our audience. What type of building do you represent? So Sophie's going to get the poll loaded here, and we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to respond to the question. Great, I think we can close the poll. And it looks like most people said NA, so maybe just coming to today's presentation to learn a little bit more about benchmarking. Great, so thanks everyone for responding. So what exactly is benchmarking? We're gonna cover that in just a minute, but we have one more poll question. And we just want to understand how familiar you are with benchmarking using Energy Star Portfolio Manager and the city's proposed benchmarking ordinance. So we'll give everyone a couple minutes to respond, and then we'll get started explaining exactly what benchmarking is. Great, I think we can close the poll and let's review the results. So it looks like some of you are actually very familiar with Portfolio Manager, and a few more are moderately familiar. So hopefully you still learn some important facts from today's presentation and learn a lot about the city's proposed ordinance. So looking forward to that. Let's continue on understanding what exactly benchmarking is. So benchmarking, when it comes to a building context, is measuring your building's consumption, whether that's energy, water, or waste and materials, and inputting that data into some sort of tool. The industry-leading tool is Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it allows you to compare your performance to historical buildings as well as similar buildings nationwide. This is just a snapshot of Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We'll actually be doing a live demo later on in the presentation, but it's a great tool and excited to show it all to you today. Next. Portfolio Manager is really flexible and powerful, and it allows you to benchmark a variety of different building situations. So for the first property, single building, single meter, pretty straightforward. Second property, maybe you have multiple buildings that are sharing a meter. Third building, maybe you have a single building but multiple tenants and multiple meters. The great news is that Portfolio Manager can handle all of these types of buildings and metering situations in its system. So now, before we talk about the regulations, I really just want to lay the groundwork for the business case for conducting building energy benchmarking. The average commercial building wastes 30% of its energy, but by simply measuring your building's consumption, you could reduce your energy use an average of 2.4% per year. Now, this isn't automatic. You still have to take action, but what Portfolio Manager really helps you do, and building benchmarking in general, is it helps you understand and become more aware of your building's energy consumption and how it's performing with similar buildings. And that typically leads people to take actions a lot of times that are low or no cost, like changing temperature set points or adjusting lighting schedules that result in these realized energy savings. So benchmarking is really the first step to taking action on energy efficiency. Once you benchmark your property, you can conduct a more in-depth analysis by comparing your property's performance with similar buildings, and then you can even plan across your portfolio to take action on energy efficiency savings opportunities. So benchmarking is a best practice for managing building energy use and helps answer multiple questions about how your property is performing. These include, what are the impacts of retrofit projects on your building's energy use? How much energy you use on a per square foot basis, which is also known as your energy use intensity. And then if your properties are more or less energy efficient than similar properties across the nation. In one survey of over 100 facility managers, they found that over 77% of respondents reported that they had changed how they operated their facility as a result of New York City's Local Law 84, which is their local benchmarking policy. And additionally, 75% actually made a capital investment in new equipment to improve the efficiency of their building as a result of the policy. So these types of benchmarking policies really have positive impacts on facility operations and maintenance. Additionally, in the multifamily sector, WeGoWise had a benchmarking report where they found that the top 25% of properties saw over 4% savings across utilities after 12 months of benchmarking and 10% savings after 36 months. So actually a lot more than that 2.4% I quoted earlier. And then ones that properties that had subscribed to advanced analytics offered on their platform saved even more energy over the time compared to ones who didn't do that advanced analysis. And overall, the properties that chose to be retrofitted with energy efficiency measures really just saw a lot of savings between 7.6 and 17% after compared with the control group. So now that we know a little more about the business case for benchmarking, we'll start talking a little more about benchmarking policies. So this map I'm always having to update. It's from the Institute for Market Transformation, and it tracks building transparency and benchmarking policies across the United States. So over the years, this has become really populated with lots of changes and lots more jurisdictions and state governments pursuing benchmarking and transparency policies. So right now in California, you'll see the entire state is orange, which represents that there's a public policy for commercial, public, and multifamily buildings, which is also known as Assembly Bill 802, or the California Building Energy Benchmarking Program. You'll also see quite a few jurisdictions on this slide have actually passed their own ordinances, which may be equivalent to or additional compared to the statewide requirements. So you'll see that Berkeley, San Francisco, San Jose, and LA also have the purple color, which indicates requirements of performance targets. And then you'll see San Diego, for the city of San Diego, is colored orange currently, since the city of San Diego does have a policy that's aligned with the state. And then the green is kind of the lower tier level, that's just public and commercial buildings, not including multifamily. So if the city of Chula Vista's proposed ordinance is passed, you would see them on here with the orange and purple color, and Barbara will get into those details in a little while. So just briefly touching base on the statewide requirements, the program requires commercial, mixed use, and multifamily buildings larger than 50,000 square feet to benchmark and report their whole building energy use data. And then public reporting of benchmarking metrics needs to occur annually using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So currently, if you are within the jurisdictions listed here, you would report to those jurisdictions. But if you're anywhere outside of those, so basically if you're in San Diego County but not within the city of San Diego, the current requirement is for you to report to the state of California. And that reporting deadline is June 1st of every year. When the city of Chula Vista passes their ordinance, instead of reporting to the state, you would then report to the city of Chula Vista. Again, Barbara will get into the details for Chula Vista in just a little bit, but just wanted to make you aware if you're in multiple jurisdictions or potentially currently in city of Chula Vista and not benchmarking, just want to make sure you're aware of the statewide requirement. The other, and I think even more crucial detail of Assembly Bill 802 is data access. So utilities must provide aggregated whole building energy use data to building owners upon request, and this started back in 2017. This means that the building owner does not need permission from the tenant when there are a certain number of accounts that are getting aggregated at that whole building level. So if you have a commercial building, no residential accounts, then that threshold is 3 or more accounts. And if you do have any residential utility accounts for electric or gas, then that threshold gets raised up to 5. And the reasons for these thresholds are just to maintain data privacy for any one individual account. And then for buildings with fewer tenants, the utility, you can still do their standard letter of authorization process to get tenant information. But this is really helpful for those larger scale office buildings with multiple tenants, larger multifamily properties, again, multiple tenants, that you don't have to go to the tenants, you don't have to bother them. You can actually just request the data directly from your local utility, which in San Diego County is San Diego Gas and Electric. And with that, I think we did have a question come in. Colleen, do you want to check that before we get started with Chula Vista?
Yes, I was actually waiting for an opportune time, so thanks. So we have a question from Alex. He was wondering if a small business owner or building owner, sorry, let me just read it as it is. So as a small business, how would I go about getting my data if I do not save my past billing statements to be able to track my energy use?
That's a good question. So there are multiple ways you could get your data, and it did clarify if you own the building or not. If you own the building, you can request aggregated whole building data from SDG&E, especially if maybe you have some subtenants in your building. If you are just you know, a tenant in a space, you can go to SDG&E and sign up for your My Account and access your data there. SDG&E also allows secret or syncing for non-aggregated or meter by meter requests. So you would need to sign up for SDG&E My Account, access your latest utility bill, and use that information on SDG&E's data request portal to access your data.
Great.
And I think there were some follow-up questions.
There is another. You may have just covered it, but I'm going to ask it. Yes, actually, I think you did just ask. You just answered all of that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Perfect. Well, with that, I am going to be handing it over to Barbara Lochi with the City of Chula Vista to talk more about their ordinance that will be going to council early next year.
Hello. So since 2000, the City of Chula Vista has been implementing a climate action plan to address the threat of climate change impacts to the local community. And as part of those efforts, the city has been tracking its building energy consumption by benchmarking and keeping track of the energy used in every building since 2009, and is currently benchmarking 28 city facilities, some of which are pictured on this slide. Benchmarking helps city staff identify saving opportunities. In fact, over the past few years, over 16,000 light bulbs were retrofitted to LEDs, and additional solar was installed at 11 buildings. Overall, benchmarking has allowed the city to track its energy consumption and realize an 18% reduction from its 2009 energy baseline. So what exactly is building benchmarking? Building benchmarking is measuring your building's energy, water, and/or waste consumption and inputting that data into some sort of tool. The industry-leading tool for benchmarking is Energy Star Portfolio Manager, provided at no cost by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Once your building use details and utility consumption information is loaded into Portfolio Manager, you can compare your building's performance against its own historical performance or similar buildings nationwide. Portfolio Manager takes into account building use details and climate zones to help truly make an apples-to-apples comparison. Portfolio Manager also provides facility managers and building owners with key data that can be used to identify and realize utility savings. The City of Chula Vista wants to pass a local benchmarking ordinance for three primary reasons. Environmental, to promote ongoing energy conservation in buildings in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions resulting from energy consumption. Savings, to help building owners and property managers find and pursue energy savings opportunities in their buildings. And number three is transparency, to enhance market transparency by making energy performance data available online and disclosed to possible buyers and lessors. In today's training, we will cover the basic parameters of the ordinance. We will cover the applicability, which is to building types and utility accounts, building sizes, energy benchmarking requirements, conservation measures, disclosure requirements, benchmarking, conservation, and reporting deadlines. Please note, this is very important, the city is presenting the ordinance to City Council in January of 2021, after which ordinance parameters may change slightly. So please be sure to check the City of Chula Vista's website for the latest requirements, chulavistaca.gov/benchmark. The ordinance will apply to all building types: commercial, multifamily, industrial and manufacturing, mixed use, etc. However, certain buildings outside of the city's jurisdiction, for example, federal buildings, are exempt. Properties with less than 5 utility accounts are exempt, but only if one of the utility accounts is residential. This is because those buildings with only 4 or fewer residential utility accounts will be unable to request aggregated or whole building data directly from San Diego Gas and Electric without a letter of authorization from each utility account holder. All buildings over 20,000 square feet will be required to comply with the ordinance. After the city presents the ordinance to City Council in January of 2021, ordinance parameters like building size will be finalized. So this is a proposed ordinance. I just want to reiterate this part. The 20,000 square feet and above is our hope for City Council to approve, but it may be changed. Energy benchmarking requirements. Under this ordinance, building owners must report whole building energy data to the City of Chula Vista using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. As mentioned earlier, Energy Star Portfolio Manager is the industry-leading tool for building energy benchmarking. You can check out the tool and even get started benchmarking by visiting portfoliomanager.energystar.gov. Building owners will be required to report data annually starting in 2021. In addition to tracking and reporting whole building energy consumption, buildings also must comply with certain conservation measures. Buildings are anticipated to be required to improve their energy performance every 5 years. Additionally, after 10 years, the least efficient buildings will be required to do an energy audit. There are also prescriptive upgrades for those buildings that have not improved in the 2 5-year increments. However, the ordinance is anticipated to allow for flexibility on a case-by-case basis. And this will also be outlined in the website, so please stand by with all of that. Finally, the ordinance requires disclosure of benchmarking and conservation measure findings. For benchmarking disclosure, annual benchmark report data for all buildings, except manufacturing and industrial building types, will be made publicly available on a map on the City of Chula Vista's website. Building owners must disclose results of annual whole building energy benchmarking to building co-owners and tenants. Disclosure must also occur to any prospective buyer prior to close of sale and to tenants prior to lease renewal. Building owners must also disclose results of energy audits and retrocommissioning reports to all existing residential and non-residential tenants. Additionally, building owners must discuss energy efficiency investment opportunities identified in audits and retrocommissioning reports with any non-residential tenant that pays utility bills to try to identify mutually beneficial co-investment arrangements to pursue such measures. We will cover a high-level overview of potential ordinance parameters discussed today. So, building types. The ordinance applies to all building types. Properties with less than 5 utility accounts are exempt only if at least one of the utility accounts is residential. Size of building. All buildings over 20,000 square feet will be required to comply with the ordinance. This is pending council approval. Performance requirements. All buildings are required to meet certain performance targets over 5 years. If those targets are met, then there may be requirements requiring a building to be audited and/or pursue cost-effective energy efficiency measures. Report requirements. If passed the ordinance, first anticipated deadline will be May 1st of 2021. Thank you for learning more about the City of Chula Vista proposed building energy saving ordinance. And for additional information, we will be updating our website at chulavistaca.gov/benchmark.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. So before we go on to the next section, I just want to take a minute to pause and go through any questions we received. So Colleen, can you?
Great, thanks. Yes, we have a couple questions. Bob's asked a question. If a business now has most of its employees working from home and will continue this practice next year and energy use has been significantly reduced, is it still mandatory to comply with benchmarking ordinances?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there definitely has been a lot of discussion on how this impacts things like Energy Star certification, which is for an optional thing for the highest performing buildings. But really, all building owners are required to report whole building energy consumption as long as there is a current certificate of occupancy. Even when employees are not on site, or maybe you only have a couple employees on site, building systems like HVAC still need to be run periodically for maintenance, as well as to serve those employees that are on site, or if there are any server rooms or things that do require a more constant level of cooling. So long story short, still required to report, though I do want to clarify that it's the building owner always that's required to report, not a business. So if you're a tenant and there's multiple tenants in your building, it's whoever owns your building who's required to report.
Great. We have 2 more questions. I think we have some time right now.
Perfect.
So we have a question from Corey, actually 2. One of them is, do we know how many Chula Vista buildings are complying with the existing state requirement?
Yes, so approximately 70 buildings submitted a report in 2020 for calendar year 2019 data, which includes the reported City of Chula Vista buildings, which is approximately about half of that.
Great. And then we have another question from Corey. Corey's wondering, how does the proposed city requirement thresholds compare to the state's ordinance?
So that's a great question. And I think the next question is also how it compares with City of San Diego. So City of San Diego and the state, their requirements are currently aligned. So we're going to answer both questions at once. So one of the main differences is the size of the building threshold. So the state and the City of San Diego currently only require 50,000 square feet and above. So that's one difference. And as Barbara mentioned, that will be finalized at City Council, so that number may change in the future. The other key difference under building types is that the City of Chula Vista's ordinance applies to all building types, whereas the state and City of San Diego categorically exclude any property where over half of the gross floor area is used for manufacturing, industrial, or controlled lab environment purposes. So that's another key difference between the City of Chula Vista's ordinance and State of California and City of San Diego. And then a couple others, performance requirements. The City of San Diego and the State of California do not currently have any performance requirements. So those are all differences compared with the City of Chula Vista's proposed ordinance. And then finally, the State of California and City of San Diego's reporting deadline is June 1st, whereas the City of Chula Vista is May 1st. So there's a little bit of difference at each one of these steps. And we definitely encourage you to visit the City of Chula Vista's website, chulavistaca.gov/benchmark, early in the new year to see the latest updates from when the city staff presents the ordinance to council.
Great. We have a couple more. Do you want to tackle them now, or should we save them up?
Let's see.
I'll ask one now. I think one looks like it's maybe for later. Let me ask one from Bob.
Okay.
He would like to know if there's any data available that shows if benchmarking followed by implementing modest upgrades to buildings increases the value of properties.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there have been a lot of studies, more specifically with Energy Star certified and LEED certified buildings, which are really top tier performers. But they do show demonstrated savings in these studies of not only ongoing operational costs, which can also help increase the property value, but additionally the rents that are coming in. Greener buildings tend to be able to demand higher rents from their tenants, and that kind of makes sense. You know, the greener facilities, you're not spending as much as on utilities, so you have the money available to spend on rent and that market rate. So yeah, there's definitely some real positive economic impacts from pursuing energy efficiency in buildings, as well as additional sustainable upgrades to your facilities.
It looks like we're good for now. Any other questions, we'll keep an eye on them and we'll ask them throughout the remainder of the webinar. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you, Colleen. Great, so we'll continue on, I think skip ahead a couple slides. Perfect, so now we're first going to do a general overview, helping you guys get to know Portfolio Manager, and then we'll follow up with the live demo and then hop back for some final details on SDG&E. So, and getting your data from SDG&E. So to start benchmarking in Portfolio Manager, I always like to say that you're going to do the most data collection outside of the tool, especially when you're first setting up your property. And then in future years, it's really just updating the energy and building use details over time. But to get started, you do need some key pieces of information for your property. That includes some key details about your property, like the primary function. Is it an office? Is it a school? Is it a medical office? Obviously, the name and location and the year it was built. Next, you do need some key property data details, and I'm going to show you a place where you can actually generate a Word document to help you gather that specific information tailored for your property specifically. But you'll need the gross floor area, which I just want to call out is not the same thing as rentable square feet. It is a different definition, and I'll show you where to find that definition in the Portfolio Manager tool. And then as well as use details. So the use details I listed here are for an office. Different property types have different use details. There are over 80 property types in Portfolio Manager, so it really gets customized for your specific building. And these use details can include things like operating hours, number of computers, number of workers. For hospitals, there are things like number of MRI machines. For multifamily, it's how many low, mid, and high rise units do you have. So lots of variation there. But again, I'll in just a little bit show you a tool that'll allow you to generate a custom worksheet for you to work on gathering this data. And then you'll need your energy data, of course. So there are a few ways to do this. We'll talk in a little bit about connecting with SDG&E to get this data. But if you own all of your meters and you want to track your cost information, don't want to sync with SDG&E because you want to track cost and demand, you will need 12 months of energy bills to put that into the tool. And we're going to show you actually how you can upload that information into the tool, especially if you've already been tracking it, maybe in an Excel spreadsheet. So why are the use details so important? In this example, we're talking about energy use in offices. These things really just impact those properties eligible for an Energy Star score. So as I mentioned, there are about 80 different property types in Portfolio Manager. About 30 or so are eligible for an Energy Star score. So for those properties, it's very crucial that you not just upload your energy usage, but you also upload and update over time your use details. So we're talking about all those details I just mentioned on the previous slide: operating hours, number of workers and computers. Cooling degree days is actually calculated for you. You don't have to put that in. But these details are really important. And the reason is because for any value of an EUI, which is your energy used per square foot or energy use intensity, there could be a range of Energy Star scores. And the reason for this is because you might be using your building differently than another building. So on the right-hand side at the bottom, we have two buildings, Building A and Building B, both office buildings. but they have different scores even though their energy use intensity is the same. So they both use 225 energy used per square foot, but building B has a higher Energy Star score. And the reason for that is building B has more hours where the building's operating and more workers, so it's expected to use more. So the difference between the expected energy use intensity and the actual energy use intensity in building B is greater. So that's why building B has a higher score. So again, just want to really call out the importance of updating those use details. A lot of people like to just use default values, but it could actually make it seem like your building's performing worse than it actually is if you don't take the time to update those. And that is required for any ordinance you're reporting, that you do make sure your use details are up to date. So now what we'll do is we'll hand over the control to me, and we'll actually dive into Portfolio Manager. So we should be getting this shortly. Great. So let me just check. We can see the screen, I think. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to confirm before I start talking about stuff you can't see. So on the Portfolio Manager homepage, there are a lot of different things that you can look at, and it might be overwhelming this first when you create an account. You're actually not going to have anything in here when you first create an account because you don't have a property yet. In our case, we already have a test property for you guys to look at. So I'm just gonna hop in here. And you'll see that in Portfolio Manager, we have two levels of navigation. We have this main navigation up at the top here, My Portfolio, Sharing, Reporting, and Recognition. And then whenever you click into a property, you have additional details available. So at this property, you'll see we don't really have any metrics yet. And actually, let me just quickly, I think I have another training property we can pull up here that has some details. So let me grab that real quick. I think maybe this one has, yeah, this one has some energy data. There we go. Now you can see some actual information populated in here. So for a dummy test property, we have a baseline and a current score. So for those property types that are eligible for a score, you're going to see your score in this upper right-hand window. If you're not eligible for your score, you'll see your weather normalized EUI, and you can actually change the metric that appears here by clicking this little pencil icon. So you can change the period of your baseline and the period of your current score, but basically it defaults to the first full year of data versus the current 12 months of data. And you'll see at this property, we've actually increased the Energy Star score dramatically from 61 to 95. And again, you'll also have a metric summary on the main page that summarizes some key metrics. And again, everything can be customized by clicking these little pencil icons. On the details tab is where you'll see all of those use details that I was just talking about. It's very important to update these and not use default values. So when we go through setting up our own test property, we'll talk about this a little more. But this is the main area where you want to make sure you're updating these as they change over time. Really, updating once a year is probably sufficient unless you have a lot of changes going on at your property throughout the year. Maybe then you want to look at it on a quarterly basis. But at the very least, each year before you submit a report, you need to make sure this is updated. And then on the energy tab, you'll see a graph of your energy use. For this building, we only have an electric meter, so we're only seeing one line. If you have gas or solar, you'll also see those lines as well. And then if you click on the meter, you can actually go in and see all of the monthly information for that property. So lots of detail. If you are uploading your data manually, you can track cost and demand, your peak demand and those demand charges, which can be very useful for making some financial decisions on your property. If you sync with SDG&E, you will only get your consumption. So that's just something to keep in mind, and we'll talk about that a little more when we talk about syncing with SDG&E. So overall, this is just a high-level view of kind of the end product. If you're eligible for Energy Star certification, which is any property getting above a 75 for Energy Star score that's eligible, you can actually apply. There's no cost to submit an application, but it does have to be verified by a professional engineer or an architect. Specifically for City of Chula Vista, it may be something you want to do to demonstrate compliance with some of those performance targets. Again, there's a list available of local service providers within Portfolio Manager, or you can use an engineer on staff with your organization. But just something to keep in mind at the end of your reporting period once you submit everything. One final thing, and we'll go over this again once we set up our test property, the data quality checker. Anytime before you submit a report, you want to make sure to run this data quality checker. It will help you in making sure that there are no addition errors or gaps in your energy data. So very important to make sure you run that on your information. So that's just a high-level overview of what Portfolio Manager looks like. I always find it helpful to kind of see the end, and now we can go in and actually set up our own test property. But before we move forward with the actual demo of adding a property, I think a couple more questions came in, Colleen.
Okay, Alex has one. If I have multiple accounts because I have several locations and I have been tracking the data, is there an easy way of uploading the data?
Yes, so that's a great question. And there are a few ways you can do it. We'll go through the manual spreadsheet template where you can upload property by property. There is a more advanced feature that allows you to upload data to multiple properties at one time. I always have a big caveat that it's easy to make a mistake and takes time to fix it if you do. So a lot of people prefer just to upload property by property, but that is an additional feature for a Portfolio Manager. So if you wanted to do property by property, we'll go through that in the demo. If you wanted to bulk upload either properties, meters, or meter entries, there's actually on the main page this manage portfolio section. And this second option, upload or update multiple properties at once, that actually allows you to make custom spreadsheet upload templates for you to get that information into Portfolio Manager. So definitely a very powerful tool. But we recommend that you do property by property if you're not super comfortable with Portfolio Manager. This is the first time you're reporting. Another thing I'll just call out since we're over here, transfer ownership. If your building gets sold, you can actually transfer your Portfolio Manager property to somebody else for them to continue reporting under that same Portfolio Manager ID number. And also you can download your entire portfolio or create a custom download. Really great for archiving, especially as any system, you know, occasionally it goes down for service and maintenance. I always find that's the exact time I need to look something up. So by downloading your portfolio, you always have that information available, a backup for your record system, and just really good practice to make that backup at least once a year. Great. Was there another question, Colleen?
I think we're good for now. We can ask another one later if we get it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So now what we're going to do is, before we even add the property, I'm going to show you how to find that data collection worksheet. So all you have to do is search data collection worksheet portfolio manager, and it's literally the first response in Google. And you just click to access it, and it lets you create a custom worksheet for you to get all those use details for your building, because you're like, how do I know what I need to know until I set it up, but then I don't have the data and I can't finish setting it up? Well, this is how you solve that problem. So you'll choose your country, the property type. For us, we'll just choose office. You can actually add another use type. So maybe you're an office, but there's also, you know, some medical offices at your property. And then if you do have parking where the energy for the lights or the elevators is tied to your building meter, you also want to come down here and select parking. If I can find it, there we go. And then we'll click look up required data. So you can look at this, but I just go ahead and scroll to the bottom and click create Word. And you'll be able to download a Word document that guides you through the data you need to get into the system. And you can save this and work on it, especially if you're trying to get information from different people, maybe facility managers, maybe asset managers. You can work on this over time before you set up your property. So it asks you to gather certain details. Anything in blue will actually link directly to the term in the portfolio manager glossary. So if I can get this to click, we'll see exactly the definition for gross floor area. Now, if you remember, I did make a note, rentable square feet is not the same thing as gross floor area. So if you don't know what to include or not to include, definitely look up this term, and it tells you exactly what to include and not include. And then any other terms in the data collection worksheet or throughout portfolio manager that are in blue, you can click and it'll take you to that glossary item. So like here, property use type that can get an Energy Star score. It will actually tell you which property types are available for an Energy Star score. So this is great resource for you guys as you work to gather your data. You'll see we have the office use details here. If we scroll down, we also have the different medical office units, uses and use details. Some are required, some are optional, but highly encouraged to be completed. And then information on the parking lot. Again, only do parking if it's tied to your building energy meter, or if it's a freestanding parking garage and you need to report the parking garage. And then here at the bottom, you can copy and create worksheets for your meters. You don't need to fill out the meter bill information, because we're going to show you some spreadsheet templates, and you can always add those later or sync with SDG&E. But it is good to know the meter name, the type of meter, when it was active. And another thing to note that's not included in here, but I recommend, is if you have meters that are shared between buildings, denoting those, because then you have to benchmark that in a certain way. So again, the biggest effort is going to be upfront collecting this data. If you already have this data handy, it's going to be super simple to run through the portfolio manager tool. As you'll see in just a minute, we have quite a few pre-populated. We have our own data collection worksheet, so it's actually going to be pretty smooth process for us to benchmark our property, really in the next half hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop my screen share for just a second, and I'm going to pull up our test information. So just 1 minute while I get that uploaded here. There we go. So we should be sharing the screen right now. And you'll see I have our test property information already filled out for our sample property. So this is what I'm going to be entering in. I won't have this up on the screen because I already know this pretty well, but this will help guide you when you complete this data collection worksheet in adding your property. So I'm going to close out of here and hop back to Portfolio Manager so we can add our property. So once you create an account and log in, again, you won't see anything here because you won't have a property. Maybe you do have some properties there. But if you want to add a new property, you just go to the Properties box and click Add a Property. And we're going to be putting in those use details from that data collection worksheet. So our primary property type for our demonstration is an office, and it's a single building. One thing, a couple things to note here. If you are a tenant, you don't need to report. Your building owner needs to report. So you don't need to benchmark your tenant space and report that. However, we do encourage, if you would like to benchmark your tenant space, to just keep track of your tenant energy consumption. We definitely encourage you to do that. And Energy Star does have a recognition program for high performing tenant spaces. I think right now it's only for offices, but they'll probably expand that program, but that won't be required. You know, these ordinances are really at the building level. If your property is a campus, meaning that multiple buildings are sharing meters, maybe your college campus or different things like that, I would suggest you click the campus guidance. It will walk you through how you set up a campus. There are a few properties that can certify as a campus, meaning that you don't have to break down each individual building. One of those is multifamily, but there are some considerations with how that works with SDG&E syncing and the multiple service addresses. So if you do have questions, definitely reach out to city staff, but you can also just benchmark each building and then have it as a campus property. So lots of different options to work with all the variety of building metering types and building situations that we have in the city of Chula Vista. But for our demonstration today, we're just going to choose one. My property is a single building. And if you have questions, you know, there are tips throughout Portfolio Manager to help guide your data entry. And there's even a help button up at the top. And if you click that, you can actually send a question to Portfolio Manager staff or learn more or even take a training. So there are a lot of resources built directly in, even FAQs, built directly into Portfolio Manager. If for whatever reason there's a conflict between what the city of Chula Vista says and what's in Portfolio Manager, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to the city if you have any questions. Most of the time it's just with the parking situation, and most likely you won't run into any discrepancies, but if you do have any questions and you're not finding the answer on the Portfolio Manager help feature, definitely do not hesitate to reach out to city staff. Finally, for your property's construction status, you're going to choose existing because all of your properties are actual properties. But for my case, I'm choosing test property since this is a demonstration. Basically, long story short, all this does is make sure that Portfolio Manager isn't calculating my property as one of the buildings to be benchmarked against. So once we've got all of this filled out, we'll click Get Started. Oh, I chose my property type. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Let's see if we can get this to work. All right, we're gonna try a different property type. There might be a little issue with Portfolio Manager. So let's see. Okay, we're doing a medical office today. If you do run into those issues, definitely reach out to Portfolio Manager, let them know. They might be having a system issue, but I've actually, in 4 years of doing this, have never run into that problem. So it's probably just a fluke. So now you'll enter that basic property information that you already gathered on your data collection worksheet. So we're going to do test property Chula Vista 12/16/2020. And it's located in Chula Vista in California. I don't know what the zip code is there, so I'll just put a zip code. I do know, and the year built, we're going to say 1970. Gross floor area, 200,000 square feet. Irrigated area, you don't need to fill this out. None of these ordinances currently require water benchmarking, and irrigated area only works if you meter your outdoor irrigation water use separately. So that's totally fine to leave blank. Occupancy, most of you will select 100%. In certain cases, you will choose 90 or 80 if your building is consistently always has a level of space that's not occupied. So say you're a hotel, a 10-story hotel, and usually only 9 floors of rooms are, in use, then you could put your occupancy at 90%. Property photo, you can upload a photo if you want, not required. And then for the standard ID, Chula Vista will have an option here for the Chula Vista building ID. Right now it's not on the list because that's still being finalized. But once you decide to benchmark your property, you would choose the Chula Vista building ID and enter the building number. The building number will be able to be found on the City of Chula Vista's website. Again, this is still going to council in early 2021. At a later date, once that is passed, then the city will provide the covered buildings list where you can look up your address and find your building ID. At that time, if you know you need to benchmark and you look up your address and don't see your address there, reach out to city staff. They just might not have your building as one of the covered buildings. And then finally, based on your primary property type, Portfolio Manager will ask you some additional questions. So like I mentioned earlier, if your property includes parking, energy consumption, definitely check that box. For data centers, we're talking about a data center with a constant power load, an uninterruptible power supply, and has probably specific heating and cooling equipment for that area. So we're not talking about a little server closet in your building. For the other uses like retail stores and restaurants, we're really looking for a significant difference in operations and operating hours. So if it's something like you're in an office and you just have a small cafe on the first floor, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like a mixed use office that has a separate tenant on the first floor that's like a big tenant that has its own operating hours and different things like that. So as you go through Portfolio Manager, these questions really help them make sure you're entering in your information correctly. For a test property today, I'm not going to choose any of these options, and we're just going to click continue. And now we'll see the basic information we just entered summarized at the top here. If you notice a typo, a mistake, you can click edit and change that on the fly. So not a problem. Everything is able to be edited and updated in Portfolio Manager. And then here you'll see the building use details. So these are the really important details that we told you need to make sure are updated and don't use a default. For weekly operating hours, I'll put 60. They're 100 or 1,000 workers on the main shift, and we'll say 1,000 computers, and more than all of the building can be heated or cooled. You can mark these as temporary values and come back to it, but we really recommend you just get the data ahead of time so that you're entering actual data, because you can't report temporary values. The current as of date will default to January 1st, the year the building was built, which is totally fine for most of you. Over time, you can actually edit this and add new information and put the start date. So maybe starting in the beginning of 2020, our weekly operating hours went down to 40 hours a week, and I could add that update, and then going forward from beginning of 2020, it would take those differing use details into account. If you do have multiple uses in your building that are a significant use differential, again, not just a small server closet, not just a small cafe, but like an actual separate use, then you can add additional uses on this screen and fill out those use details. Make sure you update the gross floor area on each use so it adds up to the right amount. Otherwise, it will create an error saying that you forgot how to do basic addition, and you'll have to correct that prior to submitting. Again, if you run that data quality checker, that's one of the things it checks for you, and Portfolio Manager will put a nice red exclamation point if you don't do your addition correctly. So lots of great tools for data quality checking built in Portfolio Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add Property. And anytime you complete a major step, you'll see this congratulations message in green saying that you did what you thought you were trying to do. So if you complete a step, or you think you completed a step and you don't see this, then double check that you clicked all the buttons and that things went in. Otherwise, you might have to redo it again. So here we'll see our empty property. All the address information up here, we've been assigned automatically a Portfolio Manager property ID. And then on the details tab, I can see all those details for that medical office that I included. And then if you were to not have this gross floor area and this match up, which you know, typically you will, but if you're adding additional uses, it might end up getting a little wonky. There will be red exclamation points right around here to tell you that it's not updated. And then for those properties that have already been benchmarking with the state of California, and you already have your property existing, if you need to add your Chula Vista building ID number, you can do it on the details page. And all you do is click Edit, and go down to the standard IDs, look for Chula Vista, which will be added at a later date, put in the ID number that the city of Chula Vista will have available, and click Save. So now that we've gone over the use details, we'll go over to the Energy tab. So right now we don't have any energy meters in our system. If you're syncing with SDG&E, they can set up the energy meters for you with their system. I always encourage everyone just to get the meter numbers in there if you're not doing aggregated. If you are doing aggregated, they will add the total gas and total electric meters for you in the system. So we're going to go ahead and click Add a Meter. And now we're going to choose the type of energy. So I'm just going to do an electric meter and a gas meter. And we'll click Get Started. So here at the property, we always encourage you to change your meter names to your 8-digit SDG&E meter number, which starts with a 0 typically, so make sure to include that. And then for units, natural gas is measured in therms, electric is measured in kilowatt hours. And then we're just gonna put our meter became active in 2017 because I believe that's the first date we have data for. And then you do have the opportunity to put custom meter IDs and values. So one of the ones I recommend using is your account number for SDG&E, which is a 10-digit number. And that's just to make it easier for you. Since you're already doing this data entry, why not put that account number there for ease of reference? Not required, but also if you want to put like the meter serves and then put tenants 1 through 5, and then this meter serves tenants 6 through 10, you could do that. It's really up to you how you want to use these custom meter fields. Again, not required. We just recommend that you include your SDG&E account number. And then we'll click Create Meters. Now on this page, you could add your data, but I always recommend that you go ahead and create all the meters and get them set up and then go back and add the data. That way you don't get lost in the process and forget to finish setting up the meters. So we'll go ahead and click Continue. And we have 2 meters, and be sure you select that these meters account for the total energy consumption for the building. Again, all of these ordinances are built on whole building energy benchmarking. So we're not just doing tenant areas, we need the whole building energy data. Again, if you have a lot of tenants, don't have letters of authorization, then you can utilize SDG&E's data request portal to request that aggregated data, and they'll get it uploaded in here for you. But once they do, you do want to make sure that you include those meters in your metrics. We'll click Apply Selections. And now on our Energy tab, we'll see our 2 meters. They're empty, there's no data in there. So next we'll just go through how to get that information added. But before I do, because I know we've covered a lot in the last 15 minutes or so, want to take a pause to see if there are any questions that came in.
Hi, Rebecca. It doesn't look like we have any here, unless I'm missing one.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll just keep plugging along then.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we'll go and get started with the electric meter. And on the top, you can see basic meter information. Again, if you made a typo, very easy for you to change anything. Or if you need to delete a meter, you maybe made one where you shouldn't have. Definitely easy to do. But for right now, we're going to talk about adding the monthly entries. So the first way and the slowest and most painful way to do this is to just do it manually and do start date and end date, which probably won't be whatever is auto-populated. And you don't need to enter cost, you just need to enter consumption. And always make sure you click Save Bills and see that green message. Otherwise, it's not saved. You can also check if the last updated field is empty, you haven't saved it yet. Obviously, this is not fast, especially if you have a lot of information to upload. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. And we've got a couple options. So there's a single meter spreadsheet template. These are different for electric and gas. So make sure you click it for each one. And you can upload your data in this format. Now you can either save the file and then locate the file to upload, or you can copy and paste. And there are actually instructions right here that say learn how to copy and paste, which is what I'm going to show you right now, because that's my favorite method. So we'll navigate to our electric meter. And as you can see, our spreadsheet's all filled out. So I'm just going to select all across all of the columns and down to the last record. And I'm just going to press Control-C. You can also right click and click copy. And then I'm going to click here, click to add entry, put my cursor in the start date and press Control-V, or right click and click paste. And all of a sudden, all that data for 3 years is already in there, and I just click Save Bills, and we're done. And it's that fast. So if you have the data readily available, You know, it's very seamless to get everything updated. Or if you have it, you know, you can easily transfer it to the format that Portfolio Manager needs. So we're going to go back here, and up here I can easily swap to my other meter and do the same thing. So again, I'll navigate to my gas meter, and you'll note that these templates are a little different because we don't have demand and demand cost on here. And I'll just select all the information. I can right click and click copy. Go here, click to add an entry in the start date, right click, paste, and there we go. And click Save Bills. And now if we go back to our property and click the Energy tab, we now have a graph of our electric and gas consumption. And if you wanted to save this, throw it in a PowerPoint, maybe for your management team, you can actually print or download that image just as it is. You don't even have to export it. But you can export your data if you need to like get it back out. So you can just export data by calendar month. You can also go to each meter and export all of the entries exactly how they are. So if we go down, there's a little download to Excel on each meter. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. So that's it. We benchmarked the property. And that's all we need to do before we can run the data quality checker and submit our report. So again, on the summary page is where you can find that data quality checker. You just click check for possible errors. It's going to be the year ending for the year you're reporting. So we're looking at 2019. We'll run the checker. And it'll tell me if there's some unusual details or just a flag. So in general, yellow is there might be a problem. Red is like there's a problem, you need to fix this. So the first one is just saying, hey, you have an unusual use detail, like you have a lot of workers per square foot. So they just are saying, hey, you might want to check that, make sure it's correct. You're always going to see these two, the no water, no waste meters. That's perfectly fine. We're not benchmarking water or waste right now. You're more than welcome to do so. It's just not required. So these will always be there. If you do have a red one, for example, your gross floor area was mismatched, that would show up here. And just so you know, when you do submit your benchmark report, the city will know if you've run this data quality checker. So it's not just like, oh, they won't know if I didn't run it. Like the city will know if you ran it and when it was last run. So make sure you run this. It really helps make sure you're providing high quality data to the city, and you're less likely to get a question back from city staff saying, hey, we think you might have an issue in the data you provided. So just a great method for kind of checking your work before you submit. And then when you go to submit, you'll actually visit the City of Chula Vista's website, and they'll have a reporting link here. Currently, there's not a lot of resources since the ordinance hasn't been passed yet, but once it will, we'll have this webinar recorded so you can view it on demand, additional resources, a link to the final ordinance, a link to the map, and of course, that all-important reporting link. Just for people to be able to see what it's like to report in Portfolio Manager, I'm going to go ahead and go to the state's website just because I want you to see what it looks like. So again, you'll go to the City of Chula Vista's website. This is just to show you what it looks like. So there will be a reporting link to report your energy use, and it'll bring you right back into Portfolio Manager. If you're not logged in, it'll ask you to log in. And you can make sure you click the right link. This data requested by should say City of Chula Vista. This information here will look different based on how the City of Chula Vista sets it up, but basically it's just instructions on how to do this. And then you can indicate if the data is being submitted on behalf of yourself or someone else. So if you're a consultant, we recommend you choose the contact you're submitting on behalf of. You can also add a contact. That just makes sure that the city has the contact information for the owner of the property. So that's coming into their system. The time frame you won't be able to change, but this is a good one to make sure you're clicking the right link. So in 2021, this should say December 31st, 2020. So just make sure the link is correct. And then if you want, you can set up all your properties at once and then report them all at once. So you can submit a report for one property, multiple properties, all of your properties. There's even a functionality to group properties. So lots of different ways to report. I recommend if you're going to have multiple properties, get them all up to date and then submit one report, just to make it easier on yourself. So in our case, I'm going to choose one property and I'm going to choose the test property we made today. And we're going to get a generate response preview. Oh. I'm just submitting on behalf of myself. And now we have the response preview generated. The main thing to note at this point is that you haven't submitted your report. You've generated a preview. So you can actually view your response and preview it, or you can actually send the response. So you have to send the response in order for it to actually submit. So if you don't get to this page, you haven't submitted all the way. You can choose who gets a confirmation email. You can even just add their email address. The format, choose Excel. That's the most universal format for you guys to be using. And then you will e-sign your submission. You'll click e-sign, it'll be a check mark, and then you'll click send data. And after you click send data, you'll actually get an email from Portfolio Manager with the attached Excel of your report. So we definitely recommend you save that for your records. And that way you get a confirmation that the report has been submitted. So that's how you submit the report. Again, the only thing that's different for City of Chula Vista is you're going to go to their website to find the reporting link. The whole process that we just demoed is basically the same. It's just going to say requested by City of Chula Vista, and like here it will say City of Chula Vista. So again, very easy, quick. We're hitting about 30 minutes. So literally in 30 minutes, I already had my data gathered. I got my property set up. I added my data, and now I'm clicking, I checked my data, and now I'm reporting my data. So the initial year is going to take a little more time if you haven't been benchmarking already, just because you do have to gather those use details. But year over year, other than getting updated use details, you know, it should be a relatively smooth process for you guys to report each year. And as always, if you do have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the City of San Diego or City of Chula Vista for that. And then if you need to request data, San Diego Gas and Electric is the one who you're going to reach out to if you do have issues requesting data. Before I hop back into the PowerPoint presentation, I do want to make sure that we answered any questions in Portfolio Manager before we talk about San Diego Gas and Electric and getting that energy submitted there.
Hi, Rebecca. I don't see any questions. I think that was very thorough. I'll keep an eye out, but folks, if you're listening, please feel free to submit questions at any point, and we'll definitely answer them by the time we're done with our webinar today. Thanks.
Great, perfect. So we showed you the City of Chula Vista's website, again, chulavistaca.gov/benchmarking. And this will be updated in the future, and you'll be able to sign up for updates. So definitely stay tuned, bookmark this, check back in the new year. And then now we're going to dive into the San Diego Gas and Electric process for requesting that sync data, whether it's aggregated or non-aggregated. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop back into the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go from there. So let me just make sure. Great. So requesting data from SDG&E. As I mentioned, there are two types of data requests. So aggregated is that whole building monthly meter data that is meeting the aggregation thresholds. So if you only have, you have multiple tenants and you only have no residential accounts and you have 3 or more commercial accounts, you can request aggregated data. For any residential accounts, that threshold gets bumped up to 5, but you do get data for all the meters in a building. And that's requested through SDG&E's website. You do need all the service addresses for the building. So all of the different street addresses where there are accounts in your building. Similarly, non-aggregated data. This is really when you own all of your meters, but you want to have SDG&E upload your data instead of doing the Excel copy and paste that I showed you earlier. It provides individual monthly data. You do have to verify each meter with an account number, meter number, and last bill amount. If one of those meters isn't your own meter, you would need that letter of authorization to access the tenant meters data. But this is also requested through SDG&E's website through that data request portal. So the portal was launched back in 2018. As I mentioned, it's non-aggregated and AB 802 regulated aggregated data. It does streamline the process for both data requests and obtaining authorizations. And the website there, sdge.com/benchmarking, the one we just had up on the screen, is where you go to start that process. You do have to make sure that you share your property and portfolio manager with SDG&E before getting started. And if we have time after we get through these slides, we'll hop back and I'll show that process. So when do you sync with SDG&E and when do you don't? Well, the easy thing is if you need to access tenant data and you don't have their permission, you have to do the SDG&E aggregated automatic updates. You will only get the consumption data. The meter entries will be by calendar month, but you'll get that on a recurring basis as long as you choose that option in the system. Now, for those of you who own all of your meters, how do you make the distinction between manual and automatic? Well, the manual process, as you saw, we're done. We already did everything to get our energy data in. There's no additional connections. You don't have to share your property with SDG&E. You can also track costs, demand and demand cost in addition to consumption. So a lot of people who own all their meters really like that level of detail and like having all of that in Portfolio Manager. Also, the meter entries will be by billing period, so it's easier to compare your existing bill with what's in Portfolio Manager. Again, some people just prefer that. But again, you only have the option to choose if you're only doing meter by meter data and you don't need access to tenant meter data. Again, no right or wrong way, just some considerations to keep in mind for those people that do have an option of syncing with SDG&E or not. Again, just reiterating this so everyone's very clear, you can request whole building energy consumption as long as you're meeting these thresholds. Commercial buildings need 3 or more utility accounts of that energy type. Multifamily, or really anything with at least 1 residential meter, you need 5 or more utility accounts. But one thing I really want to reiterate is you can request this data even if you aren't required to report. Under Assembly Bill 802, under the City of Chula Vista's ordinance, even if you're just a 5,000 square foot building, you can request aggregated data for your tenants if you meet this threshold. So that's a really important point. Benchmarking has a lot of great benefits other than you're required to do it. We talked about the business case. We talked about some of those positive economic impacts. So just want to let you know that that is available to you even if you're not required to report. So we're going to just quickly walk through the portal itself. Again, you will need to share your property before you do this, and we'll show you how to do that. But I wanted to make sure you guys got a little taste and feel for the portal. There is a benchmarking data request user guide available on SDG&E's website. It's like a textbook version of screenshots, step by step, what you need to do. And then you'll click the second link shown to access the data request portal. You can also click the link under number 2. That'll start your benchmarking request. So in step 1, you're just going to indicate who you are. So typically, this is the building owner making the request. If this is a third party consultant, you do need to have a letter of authorization on file with SDG&E before doing this process, so that they know you are authorized to access this data on behalf of the building owner. And the reason for that is otherwise there's no way to stop people from just requesting whole building data for any building. So you'll indicate who's completing the application, and you'll put in your requester information as just contact details. And then you'll enter your building information. So this is based on your portfolio manager username. So again, it'll look at your username, see the properties you shared with SDG&E, and pull those up. Request type and frequency. So the options here are aggregated or non-aggregated. Remember, aggregated, if you have tenants, you need whole building information. You're just going to get total electric and total gas per month. That's what you're going to choose. If you own all your meters, you can validate every meter's meter trio, which is the account number, meter number, and last bill amount. Choose non-aggregated. But for everyone, we highly recommend you choose recurring. That means SDG&E will continue to update this on a monthly basis. It's about a month or 2 behind. So we're in December, so they're uploading October, November this month. But that way it's going, keeping up to date going forward. You'll read the terms and conditions and agree to them, and then you'll retrieve the shared properties. And this is what it looks like. So in our case, we just have the test office and the screenshot. We did an aggregated request. You can actually confirm the meters. So if you see aggregated and you see 3 out of 3 meters, but you know you have 5 meters at your property, you probably don't have all your service addresses associated. And you may need to manually associate additional service addresses. Again, that guide I mentioned at the beginning tells you exactly how to do that. If you run into issues, you can always email benchmarking@sdge.com, and they'd be more than happy to help you with your request. Then for the meters, in our case, we do have 2 accounts requiring authorization, and it's because there are only 2 electric and 1 gas, so we need to validate those. So that's a case where you may need to validate the meter. In aggregated requests in general, a lot of times you only have 1 gas meter, so you may still need to validate that with the meter trio, which again is the account number, meter number, last bill amount. So if that's the case, you'll be able to click on the property name, put in that information, and validate those specific meters. You'll have an opportunity to review your request, and you can always go back if you need to update something. And then on the next page, you will get a confirmation. Keep track of that confirmation number. It allows you to go back to the website and check the status of your request, and wait on this page until you see a PDF download. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but that PDF download actually includes all the details of your request, more than you see here. That's something you want to save each year. If it doesn't generate a PDF, your request probably didn't go through, so please contact SDG&E, and they'll be able to help troubleshoot your request. Again, you'll need that request number so they can look up your request and see what happened in the system. If the request goes through, it takes a few days to get the data into the system. I think we have enough time for me to hop back and show how to share the property. So Sophie, can you give me sharing again? Perfect, thank you. Great, so we should be able to see my screen now. So as I mentioned, this check the status of your request. So once you submit, you can actually click here, put in your request number, and it'll bring up that status. So definitely something you want to keep in mind. So as I mentioned earlier, before you do any of this portal items, you do need to share your property with SDG&E. So the first thing you need to do in Portfolio Manager, and let me get back there, here we go, is you need to add SDG&E as a contact. So it's just like Facebook or any other social media. You can't share stuff with people necessarily if you're not their friend. So you're going to go to the contacts to add SDG&E as a contact in your account. Now, in our case, we already, I think, have SDG&E, maybe not. Let me see. No, we do not. Okay, so I don't have SDG&E. So I'm going to go up to the search bar up here and type SDGE space benchmarking and click search for new contacts. Oh, interesting. I wonder why that didn't come up. Oh, because I am connected. It just, for some reason, didn't pull it up. But as you can see, I am connected. But you would search by SDGE space benchmarking. They would come up. I'll show you what it looks like when the contacts come up. Don't just put SDG&E because you'll get like 50,000 people, as you can see. But when you get there, you'll be able to click connect, accept the terms, conditions, add them as a contact. And then once you've gotten a notification that they're in your address book, you can share the properties with them. Again, I would encourage you to set up all your properties before you do this, so you can just do it one time. But you'll go to the sharing tab and click share edit access to a property. You'll select one or multiple properties. We're just going to do that test property we made today. Let's see. Here we go. We're going to go down here and choose SDGE benchmarking. And then we're going to choose personalized sharing and exchange data. Click continue. We'll choose exchange data radio button all the way on this right side. And then we're going to give full access for our meters and our property information and none for goals and recognition. You don't need to fill out these details. That's something old from their previous system. And then you'll scroll down, choose no for share forward. That just means that SDG&E can't share your property with anybody else. You'll click apply selections and authorize exchange, and then you have one more button. You got to click share properties, and you'll see a congratulations message that the property has been shared. You'll see sharing notifications here. Our sharing request was sent along with our individual meters that we're sharing. And if I refresh the page, the system has already accepted it. So almost instantaneous. Now that this has been done, you can then go to SDG&E's page, start the benchmarking request, and submit it. I know that's a lot to cover, and you're probably going to forget it by the time you go to do this. So the benchmarking data request user guide is available for you guys to help you out. We actually go through all the way in setting up your property, how to connect with SDG&E, and how to do all of those request steps. So there's a lot of great resources here, screenshots, so you can see here, this is what it looks like. Let me make this a little bit bigger. When you find SDG&E, and how you go through and making sure your meter names match up and everything like that. So definitely utilize the resources that are available. And of course, if you have any questions or issues specifically related to the SDG&E data request portal only, you can always reach out to benchmarking@sdgne.com. So with that, we can hop back to the presentation to go over some resources and then the final Q&A. Perfect. So before we cover the resources, we have one last poll question. After today, how familiar are you with building benchmarking using Energy Star Portfolio Manager? Great. So thank you everyone for responding and for attending today's session. We'll go back to the presentation to cover some key resources for you all. So as I mentioned, the Portfolio Manager data collection worksheet is really a key tool for you guys in getting started. So we've got a link to that, the city's website. If you still need a report for 2019 to the state, we've got their website there for you guys, as well as SDG&E's benchmarking data request portal. And at the bottom is the link to access the Energy Star system. And then we did include some additional multifamily resources, including how to benchmark a campus, some FAQs from Energy Star, as well as some just general resources for energy efficiency in the multifamily sector. So definitely check those out. And with that, we'll have our final Q&A. So Colleen, did any final questions come in there?
Yes, we have a couple. The first one, what are the most common errors applicants make on Portfolio Manager?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most common errors are not making sure that your energy data makes sense. The data quality checker checks for completeness, not necessarily accuracy. So you always want to check and make sure you're getting all of your data, whether it's from SDG&E or for your own property, and making sure your metrics really do make sense for your property and the expected energy consumption. For example, if you're a multifamily or office building built in the 70s or 80s, you haven't really done any energy efficiency upgrades ever, and you have an Energy Star score north of 70, you probably are missing some data or have some problems in your use details. So doing just a simple gut check of those metrics you're getting out can be really helpful in making sure that, you know, the data you're reporting is not only complete, but also accurate.
Great. There's a question here, which I think I can answer. Are there any future changes the city is thinking about making to their program? And I think Barbara mentioned during her presentation that this is slated, the proposed ordinance that she discussed is slated to go to City Council in early January 2021. So while Barbara did an awesome job of laying out what we're proposing, there will be a final answer after the new year with what exactly gets decided by City Council. And then one or two more questions here. If a business decided to take service from San Diego Community Power next year, will that change anything, or would they need to comply?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually just hopping on their website real quick. If I remember correctly, SDG&E would still be handling the billing. And in that case, I don't think it would change, but I think a lot of that is still to be determined. But it looks like on SD Community Power's website, which I'm gonna put this in your question, it looks like it says SDG&E will continue to provide meter reading, billing, and line maintenance services to customers, and residents will receive a single bill from SDG&E showing the community power charges. So if that's the case, then I don't imagine much would change since they're still handling the billing, but that's definitely a great question.
Okay, got one more. Could you please explain once more where to find the Word worksheet for gathering data?
Yeah, so you can just Google Portfolio Manager Data Collection Worksheet, or if you go back a couple slides, it's that first link, and we'll be getting the registration list from our marketing team, and we can send out this presentation to everyone. The city can also upload a PDF to their website of the presentation. But I'll go ahead and put in the chat, where did that question go? It's Portfolio Manager Data Collection Worksheet. And if you put that into Google, it'll be like the first result.
Okay, I'm just scanning our questions. I think we've gotten them all answered at this point. If there's any questions that come in later or in the last minute or two here, we can always get back to you with the reply to that. So thank you. Passing it back to Rebecca.
Perfect. Well, with that, I think, we can close today's webinar, give you guys back a few minutes in your busy days. I know we're all Zooming between meetings. So definitely happy to give you back some time in your day. But as Colleen mentioned, if you do have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the City of Chula Vista. We will be following up with the slides and link to the website. So definitely stay tuned and bookmark the city's website so you can see next steps once they go to council early January next year. Great, and with that, I think we'll close the webinar. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.